Bay of Biscay, March 25, 1944, 09:30 hours. Captain Lieutenant Werner Henke stood in the conning tower of U-976, watching his lookouts scan the overcast morning sky. Confident that the 60 centimeters of seawater above the pressure hull would deflect any Allied shells if they crash-dived, he remained unaware that 2 Royal Air Force Mosquito FB Mark 78 aircraft were approaching from the northeast, each armed with 57mm guns built specifically to penetrate submarine hulls, even when submerged. These 6-pound armor-piercing shells could maintain deadly velocity through nearly 2 feet of water at a range of 400 meters. Henke in every U-boat commander had been taught that an immediate crash dive offered complete protection against aerial cannon fire. Training emphasized that water's density would rapidly absorb a projectile's kinetic energy, making even a meter of seawater more protective than steel. Yet, near Saint-Nazaire that morning, this long-held belief would prove tragically wrong. Flight Officer Turner's Mosquito, serial HX-935, lined up for its attack run at the precise angle and altitude that Coastal Command had perfected after months of testing. The pilot kept his twin-engine aircraft steady while his navigator prepared to deploy a weapon the German Navy had never faced before. 20 minutes earlier, Henke's hydrophone operator had reported multiple aircraft engines to the north. The crew responded with standard defensive measures that had saved many U-boats since 1943. Manning, the twin 20mm flat guns, and a newly installed 37mm cannon added at Lorient just 2 weeks earlier. These weapons often forced Allied pilots to reconsider their attacks, but the approaching Mosquitoes were not carrying the usual rockets or depth charges that U-boat gunners had learned to counter. Instead, they were armed with a new weapon system, one Reichsmarshal Göring had dismissed as British propaganda when intelligence reports surfaced in late 1943. This was the 57mm Molins gun, officially designated the QF 6-pounder class M1 with auto-loader Mark III. It combined a modified anti-tank cannon with an automatic feeding system developed by a British cigarette-making machinery company, resulting in a weapon that could fire 55 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of 890 meters per second. German naval engineers had deemed such a concept impossible. Even when captured Allied air crews described it under interrogation, technical officers at U-boat command refused to believe the specifications. Henke was no novice. Since 1940, he had completed 37 patrols, sinking 11 Allied ships totaling over 62,000 tons, earning the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. Through bitter experience, he had learned how to counter every Allied anti-submarine weapon, from shallow-depth charges to the new American acoustic torpedoes that forced U-boats to deploy decoy noisemakers. Yet nothing in his experience prepared him for an aircraft-mounted gun capable of striking his submarine from beyond the reach of his defenses, delivering armor-piercing shells that treated seawater not as protection, but as a minor obstacle. This defied everything German engineers believed about fluid dynamics and projectile physics. They held that water's density, 800 times that of air, would destabilize and deflect any shell within centimeters of impact. However, British engineers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment had proven through careful testing that a properly shaped shell, traveling fast enough, could penetrate several meters of water while maintaining lethal energy. If U-boat command had believed such findings possible, it might have rewritten submarine defensive doctrine entirely, as Turner's Mosquito descended from 500 meters in a 30-degree dive, exactly as instructed in the Coastal Command manual. Henke's lookouts finally spotted the aircraft. Their alarm, Mosquito bearing 045, sent the gun crews scrambling to aim their weapons. But the distance was too great. The 20mm rounds fell harmlessly short, and the 37mm gunners struggled to elevate their barrels to the steep approach angle, limitations that RAF analysts already knew from studying past encounters. The Mosquito's wooden airframe, once mocked by Luftwaffe pilots as furniture with engines, now proved advantageous. It absorbed flak damage better than metal and offered a stable firing platform for the massive Molins gun, which replaced the usual 420mm Hispano cannons in the nose. Coastal Command deemed this trade-off worthwhile for the gun's devastating power against naval targets. Flight Officer Turner lined up his gun sight, using the twin 303 Browning machine guns for ranging. Their tracer rounds crept across the water toward U-976's conning tower as his navigator called out speed and angle corrections. They had practiced this attack dozens of times over Scottish waters, but this was the first live test against an enemy vessel. At 09:37 hours and 12 seconds, the first 57mm round fired. 5 more followed rapidly as the automatic loader worked flawlessly under the dive's G-forces. Each 6-pound projectile covered the 400 meters to the target in under 2 seconds. Their aim was precise, striking just forward of the conning tower, where intelligence indicated the control room and officers' quarters lay, the U-boat's nerve center. Hankey had only 3 seconds to react. The large-caliber tracers moved at speeds he believed impossible for aircraft guns. He ordered a crash dive, the move he was trained to trust. Lookouts dove through the hatch as the alarm blared. The diesel engines shut down, electric motors engaged, and the bow planes tilted downward. Every motion was executed with the precision of endless drills, but this time, the sea would not protect them. The first shell hit the water 20 meters ahead of the diving submarine. Its hardened tip remained stable through the dense medium, just as British ballistic experts had predicted. Though its speed dropped from 890 to about 600 meters per second, it retained enough energy to pierce the 19mm steel pressure hull. 2 more shells followed within milliseconds, bracketing the submarine's position underwater. Inside U-976, the engineering officer had just sealed the diesel exhaust valves when the first 57mm round penetrated near frame 47. The sudden decompression in the forward torpedo room sounded like thunder as seawater burst through a hole the size of a man's fist. Steel fragments ricocheted through the compartment, killing 2 torpedo mechanics instantly and injuring 3 others preparing the forward tubes. The second shell hit 6 meters aft, destroying the attack periscope housing and flooding the control room with seawater mixed with hydraulic fluid. Hankey fought to stay upright on the tilting deck, shouting to blow all ballast tanks as water rose around the navigation table, dissolving his coastal charts into pulp. The unthinkable had occurred. Armor-piercing shells had stayed intact and fast enough to penetrate through water. The very shield every commander since 1939 believed inviolable. The British had created a weapon built to defeat the submarine's greatest tactical strength, its ability to vanish beneath the sea at the first sign of danger. Turner's Mosquito leveled out at 300 meters, the pilot struggling against recoil that had nudged the aircraft off axis. His wingman, Flying Officer Hilliard in aircraft MM-425, Love, lined up for his own pass. The surface below already showed signs of fatal damage, oil and debris marking the spot where the submarine had disappeared, a sure indicator of a breached pressure hull. Hilliard's follow-up strike proved redundant but conclusive. His 6 shells landed in a tight pattern around the oil slick. At least 2 hit the submarine again at a depth of about 15 meters, destroying any chance of an emergency ascent. Inside, Hankey ordered the crew to abandon ship through the forward torpedo hatch, the only escape route left, as the aft compartments flooded uncontrollably. By 09:42 hours, just 5 minutes after the first shell struck, U-976 lay on the seabed 27 meters below, her pressure hull breached in 4 places. Of her 52 crew members, 38 were dead or trapped below. 14 survivors, including Hankey, surfaced through the torpedo hatch, clinging to their life jackets amid the spreading oil slick. Above them, the 2 Mosquitoes, circled as Turner radioed their coordinates, to air-sea rescue and scanned for any approaching German vessels. The engagement had lasted less than 7 minutes, from the first sighting to the submarine's destruction, a remarkably short battle compared to the long, grueling depth-charge attacks U-boat crews had previously endured. Yet, in that brief encounter, the concentrated firepower of the Molins gun achieved what hundreds of depth charges often could not: the confirmed destruction of a modern Type subsea U-boat, despite all its advanced defenses. Enhanced anti-aircraft weapons and radar warning systems had proven ineffective against this new British threat. At Admiral Donitz's headquarters near Lorient, the loss of U-976 was first blamed on ordinary causes, perhaps a lucky depth charge or a mine in the supposedly cleared approach to Saint-Nazaire. That changed when intercepted British radio traffic mentioned a Tsetse aircraft's successful engagement, sending intelligence officers searching for answers. Their investigation revealed a weapon that challenged long-standing beliefs about submarine defense. The Mosquito FB Mk-78, nicknamed Tsetse after the African fly with a deadly sting, had been developed to meet a British Coastal Command need. a weapon capable of striking U-boats during the short time they remained on the surface or at shallow depth. It exploited the narrow 30-45-second window between a submarine detecting an aircraft and reaching safe depth. With the new 57mm gun, that vulnerability now stretched to nearly 2 minutes. German intelligence first heard of the Molins gun in November 1943, after a damaged Mosquito made an emergency landing in neutral Spain. Spanish officials only noted that the aircraft carried an unusually large cannon, information German experts dismissed as an exaggeration, assuming it referred to experimental rockets or British propaganda meant to demoralize U-boat crews. The truth, however, was far worse. The weapon effectively removed the submarine's greatest defense, its ability to submerge quickly, and could attack from beyond the reach of its anti-aircraft guns. U-boat commanders soon called this area the Todd Zone or Death Zone, extending from the surface to periscope depth and nearly 2 kilometers outward, where submarines were exposed to lethal firepower from unseen enemies. Captain Lieutenant Werner Hancke, rescued after 4 hours in the water by a German minesweeper, spent 3 days being questioned by officers who refused to believe his account that armor-piercing shells had penetrated his submarine through 2 feet of seawater. Many insisted he was mistaken, that the vessel must have hit a mine during the attack, until divers examined the wreck and confirmed the entry holes of large-caliber projectiles. The evidence forced a complete review of U-boat defensive doctrine. The Molins gun represented a breakthrough unlike anything before. British innovations such as the cavity magnetron radar and Lee light had already eroded the U-boat's nighttime advantage, but this new weapon marked a shift from tactical to technological dominance. It was more than an upgrade. It was a leap forward in weapon design, merging an anti-tank gun with an aircraft to create a system that foreshadowed future precision standoff weapons. British engineers achieved this through careful experimentation. They discovered that success relied not just on projectile speed, but also on the projectile's shape and material. A hardened steel core with a specially contoured nose could stay stable through water, while retaining enough energy to pierce a submarine's pressure hull. Producing such precision rounds required advanced industrial capabilities unique to Britain. The gun's automatic loader, designed by the Molins Machine Company using mechanisms from cigarette-making equipment, solved one of the hardest problems: reliably feeding heavy shells during violent maneuvers. By combining spring tension and gravity-assisted loading, the system worked even under negative G-forces, allowing a sustained rate of fire impossible with manual reloading. This innovation transformed a theoretical weapon into a practical combat tool. Tests at the Coastal Command Development Unit determined that a 30-degree dive from 1,500 meters, firing at an 800-meter range, provided the best accuracy while minimizing exposure to return fire. These demanding parameters required elite pilots, leading to the selection of only the most skilled Mosquito crews for conversion to the Tsetse variant. The first operational Tsetse Squadron, No. 248 Squadron, based at Praedanac in Cornwall, began missions in October 1943 with just 3 modified aircraft. Their early operations focused on reconnaissance and convoy escort, as crews refined engagement tactics. The learning curve was steep. One aircraft was lost in November after attacking too close and being shot down by concentrated flak. By March 1944, when U-976 was sunk, 248 Squadron had perfected its strategy, operating in pairs with one aircraft attacking and the other spotting impacts and providing cover. These tactics overwhelmed submarine defenses and ensured accurate hits, resulting in the destruction of 6 U-boats that spring. The psychological toll was immense. Word spread across submarine bases in Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, La Pallice, and Bordeaux that Britain now possessed a weapon against which there was no defense except to remain submerged. This forced U-boats to travel on battery power at low speed, even in supposedly safe zones, sharply limiting their range and effectiveness. The weapon's psychological and strategic effects far exceeded the number of submarines it destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Friedrich Schilling of U-415 wrote in his war diary on March 28th, 3 days after U-976's loss, "The men are terrified of these cannon-armed mosquitoes, calling them wooden hammers that strike even beneath the waves. Morale is suffering. We no longer feel safe at any depth. The old belief that crash diving meant survival has vanished." The German Naval High Command's reaction reflected growing desperation. They ordered U-boats to travel in groups for mutual anti-aircraft defense, a tactic that had failed badly in 1943 and was now useless against the long-range power of the 57mm gun. In one incident on March 27th, a group of 5 submarines came under attack. 3 were damaged by mosquito fire, while the aircraft stayed well beyond flak range, proving the futility of conventional defenses. German engineers proposed countermeasures ranging from impractical to impossible: armored conning towers that would make submarines dangerously unstable, and even explosive reactive armor meant to detonate incoming shells before impact. None of these solutions reached the field before the war's end. None of those measures could be developed with the resources or within the time required, leaving U-boat forces essentially exposed to a weapon that seemed to come from a different era of warfare. Admiral Donat, the architect of U-boat strategy before and during the war, later recorded his astonishment. The arrival of cannon-armed Mosquitoes that could destroy submerged submarines represented the kind of technological rupture long feared but never seriously expected. A single innovation had neutralized advantages the Navy had spent years refining. The British achieved this breakthrough through capabilities German industry could not match by 1944: specialized metallurgy for the armor-piercing rounds, precision manufacturing for the autoloader, and, crucially, the institutional willingness to combine technologies from unrelated fields. They married anti-tank gun design to an automatic feed mechanism developed by a cigarette machinery firm to create a weapon system no conventional military design office would have conceived. The Mosquito itself embodied what German orthodoxy rejected: a wooden aircraft built in an age of metal, designed by a furniture company rather than an established aircraft firm, powered by fighter engines arranged in a twin-engine layout for speed and range. That unconventional mix let the aircraft carry an unexpectedly large weapons load while remaining hard to intercept. Those unorthodox features made the Mosquito an ideal carrier for the Molins gun. Its wooden structure absorbed the massive recoil forces that would have fatigued aluminum airframes, and its twin-engine reliability let crews complete attack runs even with one engine damaged by flak. No German aircraft at the time could match these advantages, and Germany lacked a comparable weapon, or the time to develop one. Japanese naval observers in Berlin noted the crisis. Captain Yokoi Tadada cabled Tokyo on April 2, 1944. The British have deployed a weapon that removes the submarine's natural advantage: cannon shells that pass through water as if it were air. He warned that similar weapons might appear in the Pacific, and conceded that the Germans had no solution to offer, beyond prayer and luck, neither of which seemed adequate against British technology. German counter-proposals grew increasingly improvised, rather than systematically innovative. Submarine-launched fighters, technically impossible; underwater smokescreens, which would reveal positions; and acoustic decoys that mimicked engine noise to draw attacks away. None addressed the core problem created by the Molins gun, the ability to destroy submarines at ranges from which the subs could not respond. Italian naval officers operating under German control observed the same threat. Comandante Geppi Russo of the former Regia Marina remarked that they had expected improved depth charges or torpedoes, conventional weapons they could understand and counter. But a cannon that shoots through water like paper was something out of science fiction, not the naval warfare they knew. By April 1944, the Mosquito's impact spread through the U-boat arm. Crews refused to surface except when absolutely necessary. Medical officers diagnosed a condition they called mosquito neurosis, anxiety marked by obsessive sky scanning and reluctance to man bridge watches. Those symptoms reflected rational fear, given the weapon's lethality and the lack of effective defense. Operational records from No. 248 Squadron documented rapid improvement. Crews reached a 41% hit rate by May 1944, compared with under 5% for conventional rockets. The Molins autoloader proved mechanically reliable in combat, exceeding 95% functionality, figures that astounded German engineers struggling to keep much simpler systems working under fire. Wing Commander William Cass, commanding 248 Squadron, reported to Coastal Command that the psychological effect exceeded the physical damage. U-boat behavior had changed fundamentally. Boats stayed submerged even when surfacing would have been advantageous, trading speed and range to avoid exposure. Those behavioral changes multiplied Coastal Command's effect beyond the number of boats actually destroyed. The Snorkel rushed into production partly in response to the Mosquito threat offered only partial relief. It limited submarines to slow speeds, produced a large radar signature, and could suffer mechanical failures that left boats helpless on the surface. Crucially, it did nothing to stop the Molins gun from engaging submarines at the shallow depths where snorkels operated. In May 1944, Captain Gunther Hessler, Admiral Donut's son-in-law and chief of operations at U-Boat Command, completed a formal analysis. The enemy has achieved qualitative superiority through this weapon that no quantitative increase in our forces can overcome. We can build more U-boats, but cannot make them immune to 57mm shells that penetrate water as effectively as air. The conclusion forced acceptance that technical initiative had irrevocably passed to the enemy. The Molins gun also threatened surface forces. On April 5, 1945, Mosquitoes attacked a German convoy in the Kattegat and sank 5 ships, including a vessel designed to absorb damage. The 57mm rounds penetrated armor that would have repelled conventional aircraft weapons, and more than 200 naval personnel became casualties in an action lasting under 15 minutes. Naval planners recognized that the same weapon menacing their submarines could devastate escorts, torpedo boats, and destroyers, whose armor was built to resist splinters and small-caliber fire, not purpose-built armor-piercing projectiles, delivered with sniper-like accuracy from beyond. Effective return fire. Marine Headquarters Technical Intelligence examined every report on the Molins gun and identified many theoretical vulnerabilities. In practice, however, those potential weaknesses proved impossible to exploit. Despite carrying only 21 rounds, the 57mm Molins gun provided more than enough firepower to destroy any submarine it targeted. Its accuracy depended on a steady attack run, which skilled pilots could complete faster than U-boat gunners could respond. Attempts by German intelligence to gather details through neutral nations proved futile. Swedish reports described it simply as an anti-tank gun mounted on a wooden airplane. The claim sounded so absurd that several German officers were court-martialed for submitting what their superiors dismissed as excuses for combat failures. Only when photographic evidence from Spanish sources emerged did German command finally accept that the British had achieved what their own engineers believed impossible. The Luftwaffe, responsible for defending U-boats in the Bay of Biscay, soon found that its fighters were unable to counter the Mosquito aircraft effectively. The Tsetsi variant matched the speed of the Bf-109 and FW-190, while operating under escort from standard Mosquito FB Mk6 aircraft. Together, these formations penetrated German air defenses to deliver their new anti-submarine weapons, reversing the air superiority Germany once held. Over the bay, Major Johannes Kaufmann of Jagdgeschwader II led one of the few successful interceptions in April 1944. He reported, "We shot one down after a long chase." Examining the wreckage revealed a weapon of remarkable sophistication. The gun assembly alone weighed more than the armament of our fighters. Yet the British managed to make it work on a wooden aircraft that flies as fast as our best interceptors. It shows a technical skill we can no longer match. Japan followed these developments closely as its own submarines came under increasing American pressure in the Pacific. Through its embassy in Berlin, Admiral Nanomura warned Tokyo, "The German submarine fleet is being destroyed by a weapon they never imagined possible. We must assume the Americans are working on similar systems. Our submarines lack even the minimal anti-aircraft defenses of the German U-boats, making us even more vulnerable." By June 1944, as Allied forces landed in Normandy, the once feared U-boat fleet was largely immobilized in port. Crews refused to face the combined threat of traditional anti-submarine forces and the new Tsetsi squadrons, which had turned the Bay of Biscay into what survivors grimly called Der Todes Corridor, the Death Corridor. Submarines entering the area faced destruction from weapons that seemed to defy the known laws of physics. Those that tried to reach the invasion fleet found that the Molins gun was only one part of a broader Allied anti-submarine system that had advanced far beyond German countermeasures. Radar-equipped aircraft patrolled in constant rotation, detecting snorkels more than 10 miles away, while surface groups, guided by ultra-intelligence, intercepted any boats that slipped through. These overlapping patrols destroyed 7 U-boats in the first week of the Normandy invasion. Rear Admiral Eberhard Gott, Chief of Staff to Admiral Dönitz, summarized the situation in a report to Hitler on June 15th. The enemy has achieved overwhelming technical superiority. The cannon-armed Mosquito represents only the most visible aspect of a complete technological defeat. We can no longer protect our submarines, even in waters once considered safe. The U-boat war, as conceived since 1939, has effectively ended. By August 1944, squadrons such as RAF 248, equipped with the Tsetse variant, moved to forward bases in France, extending coverage over the entire Bay of Biscay and the English Channel. Most surviving U-boats relocated to Norway, accepting longer voyages rather than face the lethal gauntlet in the bay, a retreat that effectively conceded control of the western approaches to the Allies. Oberleutnant Herbert Werner, one of the few commanders to survive repeated encounters with Tsetse aircraft, later wrote, "We began the war believing that submerging beneath the waves made us safe from aircraft. By 1944, we learned that the British had made the sea transparent to their weapons, cannon shells that followed us underwater, destroying submarines that earlier weapons could only damage. We became hunted animals instead of hunters." The German Naval War Staff's final analysis of the Molins gun threat, completed in September 1944 and declassified only after the war, admitted total technical defeat. The enemy has employed weapons that use physical principles we understood, but dismissed as impractical. These results invalidate our entire submarine construction program and tactical doctrine. We have no countermeasures within reach, leaving only concealment and dispersion. Italian officers attached to the German Navy offered similar insights. Capitano di Vascello Mario Retto observed, "The Germans built excellent submarines but failed to anticipate the British approach from unexpected directions. Who could imagine that a cigarette machine manufacturer would design the mechanism that destroyed U-boats? Yet this unconventional thinking defines British innovation in this war." As 1944 turned to autumn, the U-boats that once ruled the Atlantic now operated in shrinking zones. The Tsetse Mosquito's range from Scotland covered even the Norwegian routes, forcing submarines to stay close to shore under limited anti-aircraft protection. The strain on crews reached breaking point. Experienced men requested shore duty, while new recruits declined submarine service despite propaganda calling it elite. Everyone understood that technology had decisively turned against them. Grand Admiral Dönitz, visiting bases at Bergen and Trondheim in October 1944, found crews demoralized. He wrote, "The men know they face weapons we cannot counter, cannon that kill through water, radar that sees in darkness, intelligence that tracks every move. They still obey orders, but without the confidence that once sustained them." The British exploited the Tsetse's psychological effect by feeding exaggerated reports of its success through neutral sources, ensuring German intelligence spread the fear. Many U-boat crews crash-dived at the mere sight of ordinary Mosquitoes armed only with machine guns, draining batteries and morale in pointless evasions. Even Japan felt its reach. When submarine I-29 attempted to break the Allied blockade in March 1944, the Luftwaffe provided 8 Ju-88 heavy fighters for protection against possible Tsetse attack. Despite this escort, RAF 248 Squadron engaged the convoy, damaging several vessels though failing to sink the submarine. Analysis later showed that the need to attack from long range due to fighter cover reduced accuracy, but the psychological impact was lasting. Survivors could scarcely believe aircraft could strike ships with artillery-sized weapons from such distances. Germany's attempts to build comparable counterweapons came too late. Engineers drafted plans for submarine-mounted guns of similar caliber, but technical challenges, maintaining watertight integrity and stability, proved impossible to overcome. The projects never left the drawing board. By November 1944, the Tsetse had become a symbol of Allied technological dominance. Its image appeared on propaganda leaflets dropped over U-boat bases, showing the long barrel of the Molins gun, and the caption, "Death from above and below." The campaign deepened the existing fear among crews, leading to cases of sailors refusing to deploy without Luftwaffe escort, protection that was rarely available. Operational records from Coastal Command showed that only 18 Mosquito FBMK-98 aircraft were ever fitted with the Molins gun, yet their results were extraordinary. They destroyed 7 U-boats directly and damaged 11 more, many beyond repair. But their psychological impact affected hundreds of submarines that never actually encountered them. In December 1944, Kapitän zur See Wolfgang Luth, One of Germany's most decorated submarine commanders told a gathering of officers, "We face an enemy who has mastered technologies we dismissed as impossible. Their wooden planes carry anti-tank guns that kill submarines through water. These achievements show a scientific and industrial lead that leaves us fighting with weapons from an earlier era." The Molins gun represented only the visible part of a comprehensive, Allied anti-submarine system built on scientific analysis, data modeling, and new tactics. This integrated approach erased every advantage submarines once held, reducing them from hunters to targets. By early 1945, U-boat crews operated with the constant fear that above the clouds, a Mosquito with a 57mm gun might be waiting. The sea, once their refuge, had become just another battlefield medium. Crews developed superstitions, even painting anti-mosquito symbols on their towers, knowing it offered no real protection but some measure of comfort. In February 1945, one of the last recorded Tsetse attacks occurred when two Mosquitoes from 248 Squadron intercepted U-327 as it tried to enter the Atlantic. Within 3 minutes, the 57mm shells destroyed the submarine despite upgraded defenses, proving the weapon remained deadly until war's end. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, dozens of U-boats lay idle in Norwegian bases. Their crews had refused final suicide orders, recognizing that such missions would mean certain death. They understood the balance of power had shifted completely, from hunters to hunted, from strength to vulnerability. After the war, Admiral Andrew Cunningham, First Sea Lord of the Royal Navy, called the Molins gun one of the most psychologically devastating weapons used against the U-boats. Its true impact, he noted, was not in numbers sunk, but in destroying the belief that diving offered safety. It broke the morale of crews who realized no depth could protect them. Post-war studies by German naval officers working for Allied intelligence later classified the Molins gun as a capability-breaking system, a weapon that did not simply improve existing tactics but rendered entire doctrines obsolete. They acknowledged that Allied coordination of aircraft, weapons, and intelligence had reached a level Germany could never have matched. A former U-boat commander, whose name was redacted in Allied records, summed it up best. "We believed water would always protect us, that the sea was our armor. Then the British proved otherwise. Their shells pierced the depths we thought were safe, showing that in modern war, there are no sanctuaries, only temporary shelters that technology will one day overcome." The 57mm Molins gun, fired from wooden Mosquito aircraft once mocked as furniture with engines, proved that innovation can come from unexpected places, that cigarette machine makers could design lethal weapons, and that wooden planes could outfly metal fighters. In the end, it was not just submarines that sank, but an entire belief system about what the sea could protect.